Welcome to Windows on the World, bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories. On tonight's show,
I think the most important thing to notice about the current time is that the cost of actually building housing, just the actual building, not demolition costs beforehand, is lower than ever in the last 1,000 years. Yet, the cost of moving into somewhere and buying it is higher than ever, and the crisis is deeper than ever, because super profits are being made by land grabs, speculators, etc. Right? And the reason, and the market, by the way, obviously has totally failed to satisfy needs. I mean, these facts should mean housing should be cheap, but it's not. It's the absolute opposite. So the reason why we have squatting and housing struggles is to resolve these contradictions, obviously in favour of those who need, as opposed to those who do not need, who are busy speculating, keeping properties empty. So we're going to, here today, we're going to learn about past struggles, how to apply them in the future, and try and apply these lessons to move forward, both in terms of expanding struggle, but also in terms of policies which must be applied by a future government, or could we fight for them now anyway. So that's what I want to say about introduction. Now it's over to Mike, who's from the chair, and I'll
just a couple of words as well, only a couple of minutes. I got involved with housing campaigns with peers many years ago. I think it was 1998 or something like that, first of all at Aylesbury Estate. And we met up again during the Corbyn campaign, during Jeremy Corbyn campaign, and began to discuss about future housing policies. I think we're at an important moment in the struggle about housing, because people like yourselves with enormous experience and diversity from different directions you've come from now have the opportunity to formulate methods not only to defend council housing or squatters and campaign on basic issues, that everyday issues, legal issues and so on, but also to envisage a future of housing whereby housing serves the needs of the general population and whereby everyone gets a house. This is a commitment that Jeremy Corbyn has said he wants to achieve. So in other words, we can impact and influence the direction which these policies take into the future. And that means not just in terms of, let's say, making a policy that Jeremy Corbyn might adopt or the Labour Party might adopt to be implemented in the future, but at a basic level in every single area in the country, we should be able to formulate policies to work out how we can build houses, regenerate society, bring in architecture students, bring in architecture practices, bring in community groups, let people establish their vision about how housing and the infrastructure of society should look in the future, and then push in that direction inside the labour, trade union movement, local councils, local governments and so on. And I'll talk a little bit more about some specific elements, concepts about that. But for example, when I went to Aylesbury, just to finish, when I went to Aylesbury a few weeks ago and saw the same estate with the team 15 years ago, what I then thought was maybe we could work towards, in these sort of estates which are being threatened, refurbished, privatised, socially cleansed and so on, what we might perhaps do is try and work out some way that by, let's say, next summer, we have like big inclusive social events, pop concerts, events that would draw in the whole community, engage them in a collective action, and then bring them together into a campaigning force that can think about and envisage how the future should be and how housing and social spaces should be utilised for the people in the future. So that's the sort of rough outline of yeah, can I ask Yanis to just come in for a few minutes, just about momentum, and then perhaps we will...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep it very brief. So I worked on the Jeremy Corbyn campaign, making some of the films for the campaign with others as well. And so now there's a new movement starting out called Momentum. You might have heard of it. And it's the idea of building upon that a very inclusive organisation, but to get people directly involved in politics. Because now Jeremy Corbyn has won the Labour leadership. It's not like we've done our jobs, now we can go home. No, that's when the real work starts right now.
But didn't you catch me? You said called what?
Sorry?
You said it was called something. Was it called?
Momentum.
Momentum. Sorry.
Momentum. So this is where the real work starts on many, many levels. And so obviously this is a grassroots community-based organisation right here. And this is where it should start as well, on local issues, but being able to connect up with the wider movement and also influence the Labour Party and other parties and other politicians to start thinking on a much more, these are our constituents, we have to work for them. It's not the other way around, which is how it's been for many, many years. So this is just a little thing. I'm filming this now. It's very important to, when you can, film different clips of what you might be doing, organising, to make sure that you have a way to get the message out there. Because however many people are in this hall, there are millions of people tonight all over the country checking their Facebook feeds and looking for interesting videos or whatever there might be. So if you can get your video out there on the internet, spread the word. It's always very, very good. So this is something we can all do. We've all got mobile phones. We can all put these little packages together. And so these skills must be shared and used. And that's pretty much it.
Thanks very much.
Now, putting it in historical context, squatting is driven by necessity and a legal window which used to exist and is now largely closed, namely the Statutes of Forcible Entry of 1381, which were introduced to hold back the Peasants' Revolt, funnily enough. And they said, none from henceforth may make any entry into lands or tenements save where entry is granted in law, and not with strong hand nor with multitude of people, but only in a peaceable and easy manner. Now that was written by the king to take control of land disputes. Instead of people fighting about it and the peasants taking landlords' land, they said, no, you've got a dispute, go to court. Okay? It was to strengthen the kingly power, get rid of the concept of common land, which was eroded ongoing for the next 600 years. But of course there's a hole in there, because it means now, or then, if we have a dispute about land, you have to go to court first. Now, the powers of the boys since then have repealed the Statute of Forcible Entry 1381 and have made it a criminal offence, so you don't have to go to a civil dispute before deciding if you should stay on that land or not, i.e. the criminalisation of what was hitherto a civil matter. So obviously we say civil matters have to stay civil matters and keep the police out of this, i.e. squatting should be made legal again. Should have took the round of applause for that. Back then, 40 years ago, and I have to say, I wonder, 40 years ago, that is a long time. Now, then, I can't remember talking to my father about anything that happened in 1935, except it was bad, that's all I know. But we are talking now, with a lot of people here, about what happened 40 years ago. So we must have done something right in order for us to still remember it. And I would say then, there was about 100,000 people squatting in the country. Probably more, actually. Might have been 100,000 squats. And my experience of these places was they were amazing. Well, there was individual squats, but where there was communities, they were communities of struggle, as well as being actually theatres of possibility. There was all sorts of creative stuff. It was an amazing time to be around. And I remember now, I'm going to start regressing, I dare say, but, I remember stuff as if it happened yesterday. And this place here was Maida Hill, top of Maida Hill. It's where 6 roads meet. If you stand on the corner there, you'll see at the junction of Elgin Avenue, Waterton Road, and so on. So it was obviously, historically, it's a very important place, and high ground, and so on. And we had a lot going on. You see, we couldn't go into all the detail, which is to say, we had that squat there. There were 600 squats in the area. 600 squats, not squatters, 600 squats. Elgin Avenue had 200 squatters in it. Waterton Road, where the clash began, as the 101ers had about 50 or 100 squatters, and so on. So it really was a dynamic place. And the important thing was we had a community cafe, which was at the end of the road here, where the road entered here. There was a cafe called That Tea Room, run by David.
Goodall.
That's the one. David, say his name again.
Goodall.
That's right. David Goodall was a good guy. Fantastic place. And we had work tokens that people could get food in there if they did work like building barricades, if you had their own little money, you know. We had, obviously, we built barricades, we had street meetings, we had people's courts, we had a news sheet called Elgin Avenue Struggles Yes. Easy, called an easy sheet, which became pretty famous. But I think the important thing to realise about why we won, I think really there were three things. First of all, about the external, well, internal plus external, was we were openly organised and we had news sheets. So no mobile phones, nothing like that, right, guys, those who were new, right? The only way you knew something was by talking to somebody or possibly getting hold of the goddamn telephone if you could, and it didn't work often, right? And communication was by the written word, these leaflets, right? And they were dynamite. You give them out in the street, people start reading them and grabbing them, actually read them. Unlike now, where you've got newsprint pouring over you, right? So we were openly organised, so everybody knew that what they were doing was part of what everyone else was doing. Of course, there were things that had to be done in secret, like organise the next squat somewhere no one can know where, because the police agents will be present in the meeting, of course. We had they're probably here too, but let's say hello over there. We had demands which related to the needs of the wider community. No evictions, housing for all, decent housing for all, and also GLC show us the plan. So we believed in accountability of plans. And the most important thing at the end, we were prepared to take matters to their logical conclusion. That is, we would defy the law in the name of people's rights, i.e. the right for housing is greater than the right, so-called, of the bailiff or the duty to remove it. And once you're prepared to defy the law, the impact of your struggle goes up and up. Now, and alongside that, we had, I would say, two really crucial tenets of struggle, which are tenets, not tenets, which you have to have if you're going to keep it together. One was we said, all who struggle are guaranteed support. 100%, whatever happens. Anyone arrested, you back them all the way. Anyone who's evicted, you find them another place. And specifically, if you like, the second point is there will always be a backup squat, probably secret, in the event of the struggle to rehousing not succeeding. In the case of Elgin Avenue, somebody had squatted the caretaker's house to the school up the Harrow Road. That was going to be our backup. Actually, we all got rehoused. We squatted it anyway and had festivals in there where Heathcote Williams taught me how to blow fire. In the case of Huntley Street, the YWCA in the Post Office Tower was the place, and we did use that as a squat, and it did result in rehousing, forcing young Ken Livingstone, then, who suddenly became in charge of housing in Camden. I don't know how, but he had. And he rehoused everybody. Anyway, so how did we get to actually winning? Well, am I going on too far already? Okay. 1972, I started squatting. My brother Andrew, not to be confused with Jeremy or Edward the eldest, but Andrew he actually died in 2001. Heart problems. He said to me, because we had a housing problem in Notting Hill, well, let's squat. And I said, don't be silly, only hippies do that. And he said, doesn't matter, Peter, let's just do it. So I said, okay, you fine, that's all right. Now then I was in the International Marxist group at the time, struggling for correct ideas and all this stuff. I said to them, look, we want to, squat, so do what you want. But then we realised there was a struggle going on. So I said, look, we want to organise these people and fight for housing, because the authorities, which were coming to, wanted to get us out. And they said, oh, Piers, come on, they're all lumpen proletariat. You can't do that. And then I said, well, we're going to. So, okay, all right. You can do it, Piers, providing you accept that the real tenant struggles in Notting Hill are more important than what you're doing. I said, okay, fine, I agree. So we carried on. All right. Now, the struggle there, you have to understand, it was very, very political. What happened? The GLC, because of the Wilson stop-go policies, they had this street, Elgin Avenue, numbers 9 to 51. They'd licensed out some of the houses to short-life community housing on the condition that they had to be handed back on a certain date. And others they'd left because SCH wasn't able to take many houses. So we moved in one, which was a squat, and then to try and control us, they said, oh, no, we're going to and put you in SCH. So they moved our house to SCH, which was really good and the biggest mistake they ever made. Because what happened then, we went to SCH and said, look, you've got to give up this right to be here because they want to do something, okay? But you were only forced to sign these agreements because the homeless are weak. We say, break these agreements. And Shelter, who were funding the Family Squatters Advisory Service, which was the coordinating body for all these short-life community houses, said, oh, if you do that, we're going to cut off the funding. So we went to meetings all over London saying, break the agreements, decent housing for all. And we won the debates. We won those debates. And we had big meetings up in Camden, SCH, where there was squatters at the back saying, if you going to come and evict these people yourselves, are you? You know what I mean? So they were making aggro, true, but we won the debate. And then what happened? Shelter, campaign for the homeless, cut off the funding to the Family Squatters Advisory Service. So they had no money. And I said, well, we can't have that. We'll run it ourselves. And we got a fellow called Eric Mattox, who was squatting in Walterloo Road, next to what became the Clash, i.e. the 101ers, and he complained about their noise, by the way. I said, Eric, you go there, can you do it? Because he's a very together guy who worked for the GLC as a gardener, funnily enough. He went there, took over, and it became a voluntary setup. And we changed the name to the Advisory Service for Squatters, which is what we have still here. Now, so getting back to how we got there, right? So, you know, that was what determined. So then, of course, we're on our own. Elgin Avenue, GLC wants to evict a lot, so what do? Well, we organise and organise and organise. But there was a lot of things which, you know, our basic policy was extend the struggle, export the struggle, expand the struggle. And we did squats, right? Now, the reformists who had wanted agreements, they squatted Centre Point on January the 1st, 1974. Now, we went along there and said, no, you shouldn't leave when you said, you should stay put. We had this demonstration outside, but they left. And we called this the last gasp of militant reformism, which is, you know, a good IMG phrase, don't you think? And then we squatted on my birthday, I have to say, some luxury flats on the 10th of March that year in Dover Street, which we called the Squat for Keeps. And at the same time, there had been stuff going on in Camden, 220 Camden High Street had been squatted by, again, this was involved IMG and others, but, you know, the IMG was just one of many people involved, I have to say. We weren't, you know, we imagined we were in charge, but I'm sure we were not. 220 Camden High Street was squatted to stop. It was done by Joe Levy had bought the shop, evicted the occupiers, which is a furniture shop, and wanted to buy the whole block there, the whole region, as a part of a chessboard to speculate and develop. So it was a big struggle. Right? Well, anyway, on the same day, they evicted 220 Camden High Street and Dover Street luxury flats together. But the resistance we put up and the noise we made got the council so incensed that they CPO'd the whole block up in Camden High Street. And I went there only a few weeks ago, and I went to 220 Camden High Street, which is selling rubbish, and told him he was part of the revolution, and told him how I was, and he thought this guy's firing something. Anyway, he's paying rent to the council. You should have thought that. As opposed to so legal. And that speculation was the problem. Now, but how did we get into a state where we're able to actually win? There was a lot of stuff going on. They tried to cut off our electricity. We occupied the Notting Hill Electricity Board showrooms. A lot of us got arrested, the LED 26, especially the front group claiming. Tremendous fun. Well, yeah, I would say fun, but it was pretty heavy, you know. We had a big campaign. They tried to get us out in summer '74, but they made a mistake in the High Court. They made a mistake by giving us permission to be here while they talked to us about when we should go. And then they issued squatters' eviction orders, possession orders, before the date had come by which we had to go. So we said, but we're licensees. While you gave us the possession order, so it doesn't apply. And the judge said, you're right, it doesn't apply. So we won, but then they went completely berserk and refused to talk to us at all. They had said, the Tories then and the Labour, they both said, in fact I think it was the Tories that said this, because the Labour in charge then, said, these people in Elgin Avenue were hippies, dropouts, political agitators and young tourists who got no right to housing from the state. Okay? That was their view of us, which is pretty heavy. So we want to make sure, get families in there, which we did, and we told them the dangers. And, when the electricity campaigns, the authorities are coming out and digging up holes and so on. And, we filled in the holes when they went for lunch and stuff like that, which was rather fun. The winter of 74-75 was, actually I think, shit, are we going to win this? Because we only had 40 people in the street. The authorities didn't know that, and there's room for 200. And I said to people, we're going to build barricades. They sort of looked at me and said, yeah, okay, Piers, we are. And so everyone who came, I talked to them, look, if you want to move in Elgin Avenue, we're going to fight to the end and build barricades. And I would have to assess if you're okay. This guy's honest when he says he will, this one, we'll send him off somewhere else. But we were a magnet, and we just expanded all the time, see? And made sure people who moved in were prepared to fight. Then something fantastic happened. We squatted the canal flats by the canal, which are not there anymore. They turned into some, yuppie garden, but anyway. We squatted the canal flats, and we were talking about resistance there. And then we had the front page of, I might have even been a Sun, actually. It said, Terminus Road squatters in Brighton had turned back the bailiffs. So I got this, I should have been, look, some people have won, they've beaten the bailiffs, they've built barricades, they've beat the bailiffs. I said, oh yeah, okay, all right, Piers, let's do that in Canal Flats. So we did it in Canal Flats. We had great big eviction, a lot of noise, the squatters were chucked out on the street in the rain and were lined up in the rain, buses watching them. It's a completely stupid PR exercise by the other side. And we got support from the local vicar. He said, Jesus, whatever, he knew, went on about how God condemned those who made people homeless, It was, well, we had God on our side, that's for sure. So then I said, look, when it comes, we're going to have to build a steel Elgin. And people said, yeah, that's right, we will build barricades. So we filled up the street and cut it all short. October the 8th, 1975, we were in the High Court, along with 300 squatters, with 200 of us, 300 squatters from Cornwall Terrace, squatting the land of his Britannic, is he Majesty, what do you call him, Prince Charles? Anyway, his properties were being squatted. So there were 500 squatters in the High Court, which was like, it was a fun place to be that day, I can tell you. And we had a bet between our two barristers, the Cornwall Terrace ones and mine, which was David Watkinson. Is he here? Anyway, this is so funny. They were standing in the middle of that great hall in the High Court, and they were arguing. What's his name? Andrew Arden. Whose case is going to last the longest? Andrew Arden said, "Well, I've got 300. You've only got 200. Ours will last the longest." And then David Watkinson said, "No, we've got a secret weapon." "What is your secret weapon?" "Ah, it's Piers Corbyn," he said. "That's our secret weapon." And sure enough, our case went on to the next day, I think. Oh, no, well, it went on longer than all the rest anyway. Theirs collapsed because they started arguing amongst themselves. Anyway, we won the length argument, but we actually didn't win the court case because they bolted up everything. And we even subpoenaed the director of housing and all the councillors. And they were sitting there sort of praying. It was really extremely funny. Anyway, so we said, okay, we had a little rally and so on, and I said to people, well, we're going to stay put, build barricades. And then Michael Ellis Harris, the Under-Sheriff for London, walks up and said, "Excuse me, I don't think you've got that much time." He said, "Who are you?" He said, "Oh." Tell us who he was. So he was trying to scare people. So we went off down the street, right, back to base, and big meetings, people building barricades, and I thought, well, shit, this is a problem, and it could be dangerous. So some people were moving stuff out. I didn't move a single leaflet or piece of paper out of my room, which was completely full. And some people moved stuff out. But we were kind of just, people were, what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. We'd heard rumours of rumours that they might attempt to rehouse us. Might do, but just rumours of rumours. I said, over that weekend, of the 200 people in the street, only four people left. So I knew then we would win, okay, because we were there. We built the barricades. People were prepared to stand on the roofs and throw them, right? So Michael Ellis Harris and his cohorts turned up at noon, and we said, "Oh, hang on," because, oh, well, okay, cut a long story short, The GLC then on the Monday asked us for a list of occupants. What for? Oh, we just want to know. We know what it's for. We went down to the GLC, and there was a big argument between Mr. Lancelot Hogbin, the GLC official, and Richard Balfe, the GLC councillor. And Mr. Hogbin said, well, it can't be done in the time required. And Balfe leaned over to him and said, it will be done. It was a bit like a Yes Minister moment. Well, it was a Yes Minister moment. So, anyway, sure enough, they produced the list. We inspected the properties. Michael Harris came along at 12 noon. We said, no, we ain't ready yet. We haven't had the report back from people who were coming. Now, I knew that he couldn't evict us then, so it was a good bit of practical. So we had to withdraw. And then he came back in an hour's time. We had inspected the sufficient numbers, and we all got rehousing then, driven away in vans, hired by the GLC, including people who subsequently became squatters and joined in the fun. Okay. So, quick run of applause. No, well, I haven't quite finished, so I better do a bit about the other stuff going on at the same time. So, that was exemplary and inspired a lot of others. And we'd set up or joined the setting up of things like All London Squatters Federation, which had happened until then. Then we set up a thing called Squatters Action Council, which the anarchists didn't like. This is an IMT thing. Anarchists didn't like it, so we said, okay. So we were trying, you know, there's differences within all groups then as now. We said, okay, you don't like it, we'll drop it, and we'll set up something which you can all agree with called the London Squatters Union, which set up a charter which was actually tremendously successful. But because we stayed organised, and even though the authorities changed the law in 1977 to, make squatting more difficult, the GLC, then the Tory GLC that got elected in May in 77, said, we cannot continue to tolerate the situation where 30,000 people live outside the law. And they gave tenancies to all their 10,000 squats. All of them got tenancies. At the same time, the new law coming in to hit us hard. So I'll zip through the rest very quickly. We got involved in squatting Huntley Street, which was a block of police flats, funnily enough, by Good Street, which ended up with, I mentioned, eventually getting rehoused and expanding of SCH. There was the Villa Road squat in South London, big Lambeth thing, I just mentioned that, because they were amazingly effective. I mean, one day they had 2 simultaneous occupations of different housing offices in Lambeth. And of course, the officers were phoning, have you heard they've occupied the housing office? Have you heard? And then, what? And there were all these messages going around the town hall, but it's actually 2 housing offices, so they didn't know what was going on at all. They did win in the end. We organised a Jubilee squatting campaign in 1977, wasn't it, as well, when we occupied 17 Carlton House Terrace, which overlooks the Mall, the night before the Queen was meant to drive past. And funnily enough, that squat only lasted 45 minutes. The police came in through the roof with dogs and chucked us out. And I was outside. So, no, what about our rights? He said, you ain't got no F rights when the Queen is coming past tomorrow. So we reassembled in Trafalgar Square and went off and did some other things in Camden. We had another campaign called the Squat Against Sales campaign when the Tories came to power. Melvin Wallace here. Now, then I just want to end more or less by the sequel to Elgin Avenue, because they'd built houses on the Elgin Avenue patch for the waiting list. And then the GLC had been taken over by the Tories, and the Tories said, we're going to sell them off. So they were going to sell them off. So, the day before, we had one attempt to squat them in Christmas of 1881, where I got pretty badly beaten by the police. I got bruised in the, kidney bones, stuff like that, very nasty. But we decided we weren't going to give up. And we went back there on election day, the 7th of May, 1981. But of course the police were all busy, they don't want stuff on election day. So we went in there, occupied a token flat, put a banner up, and then I walked over to the Labour Party headquarters, Chippenham Road, and who's standing there but Ken Livingstone, who was hoping to become the leader. And I said, Ken, we've just squatted the flats over there that the bastard Tories want to sell. And he went, oh, that's good. So his first reaction was, fuck me, and he was quite shocked, because he knew if he's going to be leader, he's going to have to cope with us. So he put a smile on, great stuff, Piers, great stuff, yes. I said, well, you've got to stop these sales. He said, we'll do what we can. All right. We had a meeting with them. They said, can't stop the sales, the law's taking its course. I said, fuck that, or something was that effect. But he said, then I said, well, the bottom line is, everybody there now, the new lot, have got to be rehoused too. And him and Gladys Dimpson simultaneously said, how many of you are there? It wasn't a question of arguing with us at all. So we all got rehoused then.
So, Piers Corbyn, welcome to Windows on the World.
Thank you.
Well, it's very, very interesting tonight. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in Paddington Arts Centre this evening?
Well, Paddington Arts Centre had a meeting about the 40th anniversary of the Elgin Avenue victory of squatters at the barricades on October the 15th, 1975, and that was taken as a starting point to talk about how those squatting and housing struggles then can be learnt from and applied to now. And we went through all the history of principal squats from then until now and talked about applying them in the modern housing movement and demands now from government and councils.
So, in those 40 years, we heard quite a few things about the changes that have gone, especially with the laws. How does this stand now with councils riding roughshod over people's rights, in the respect that we have these change agents in local authorities and the public are not being properly consulted either? Where do you think that really leaves us?
Well, the point about the victories that we've had were always, it was about mass mobilisation, people being prepared to defy the law in order to make these authorities accountable. And that has to be the continuation. I think the general political backdrop is very important, which is understood, namely that the situation now is that housing is being built cheaper than it's ever been built for centuries compared with income, yet it costs more than ever compared with income. And this shows two things. One is the market, open market, completely fails to fulfill needs because property speculation comes into play, and those who don't actually need housing buy it in order to make money out of it as the value goes up through the shortages which they create. And the second thing is that the way to actually prevent this requires collective action, and you can't just rely on the open market. So there's got to be legal situations where it's have to be just against the law for property speculation to operate. So that has to mean a lot more state ownership of property and land. You have to go for council housing, not other sorts of housing, and you've got to have rent controls which are enforceable, and you've got to have complete control of the housing situation in terms of what currently is left just to the market.
Yeah, and there's a lot of part ownership flats now, which are basically just tenancies, and it's like you're saying, the cost of the housing is now through the roof. Do you see a point where
what's charged for the housing is through the roof? The production cost is very, very low.
Absolutely. So do you think that the market will become saturated and people will start basically stop investing in property if the interest rates go up? Do you think that helps?
Well, that is a possibility because it's a bubble, right? There's flats have been built which will never be used under the current circumstances because they're owned by people that want to keep them empty in order for value to go up. But at some point it'll all go bang and you'll have a big crash in this stuff and you could turn into a Detroit situation. Now, that might not happen in London, but it will happen in other cities. So the market is leading to complete chaos. You've got to have proper planning for housing. And again, the Tory and capitalist ideas on how to run housing are completely failing.
Yes, people feel that they're not having an input at the local level, and that came up tonight. It was very interesting. People were actually talking about getting groups together with direct action, and I think that is the only way forward. When I'm looking at local authority issues myself, I'm finding that planning people are being brought in from outside, very short-term contracts. There's no accountability. And when I spoke to you a few weeks ago, when your brother was elected leader of the Labour Party, you were saying that accountability. How would people go about doing that?
Okay.
Who weren't at this meeting tonight?
You're right. And that is the fundamental question, how to impose people's accountability onto councils. Well, all right, what you've got to do, you've got to find out what they're doing. I mean, presumably it'll be about some plan they want to impose or do some building or destroy an estate. Well, find out what they say and why, and then just demonstrate, challenge them. There will be planning opportunities in the legal process where you challenge them there. Then you insist on having public inquiries. For example, there's one on the Aylesbury about the compulsory purchase order, part of the process they're required by law to have. And we've raised so many objections that the inspector is thinking, okay, maybe stepping back a bit, and maybe she'll find enough favour, maybe not. But what we said is, if she doesn't accept the ballot of tenants, and I would say always get a ballot of tenants on residents in any area, get those to happen. If the authorities don't have respect them, then either say, okay, have a new ballot, if they've got a reason for not accepting it, they say, or demand a judicial review and then get a judge to say this is illegal. Now, there have been successes on these lines of resistance. It requires hard work and drawing people in. But you see, there's now a different mood afoot. People want a different England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, a different United Kingdom in terms of how people perceive it than we've had up to now. I mean, we want to have one where we have a state which actually cares for everybody, where everyone has a right to decent housing, where everyone has a right to, fair play at work, where we have, laws against discrimination which are actually implemented. And these things can be done once people realise that, the world doesn't have to be like it is. And now we've got the internet and collective communications. It's so much easier to get, big appearances of people in the right place at the right time, and that has done and will force the authorities to respect. You see, these Labour councillors, you say they're in the Labour Party, so say, well, do you support the Labour Party now? If you don't, you shouldn't be there. If you do, you've got to be accountable. You've got to say, no, we're not going to demolish this council housing. We're not going to force up rents. We're going to accept that everyone has a right to a living rent.
Yes, that's a very good point. And local authorities implementing so-called green agendas, which is basically sustainable development, is having an impact on the housing crisis and shortage, and basically this so-called gentrification. Now, this is where your other side comes in, Weather Action, and you have been campaigning against the idea of man-made global warming.
Absolutely.
Can you just tell us how this ties in with local authorities and the decisions that they're making now?
Well, the local authorities, you see, are imposing what they call green agendas, and they use these things to justify a lot of stuff, including, destruction of council housing. I mean, there's all sorts of ways they impose the green agenda to justify gentrification and so forth, and they just use it as a cover-all. But the point is that this green agenda, when it's done in the name of reducing carbon dioxide, is a nonsense, because carbon dioxide is not actually causing climate change. The world temperatures control the levels of carbon dioxide, not carbon dioxide controlling world temperatures, and that is an observed fact. And we could go into a lot more about what's nonsense about their so-called theory. but in terms of social cleansing and social policy and environmental policy, which they run into planning policies, of course they're using these nonsense ideas to, in the end, make the rich richer and the poor poorer.
I think that's one of the most important things that I've come across, in the respect that people don't seem to have a grasp of what's really happening locally,
No.
especially with these policies that are being pushed. For instance, in Walthamstow there's a thing called Mini Holland, which is pure Agenda 21 scheme done on the back of cycling. Now the place
Yes.
that they're bringing this to, Walthamstow Village, and there'll be a further 2 villages, Mark House Village and Black Horse Road Village, are places that you can walk around in 5 minutes. So the cycling is being used as a kind of issue to divert away from what's really happening, and it really is about gentrification.
It's fencing off a whole area, so it becomes like worth a lot of money and not suitable for existing local people.
Absolutely, and that ties into a lot of what's happening.
And it's all done in the name of saving the planet. But of course it's not saving the planet, it's destroying the community.
Thanks for watching Windows on the World. Remember, keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World, and we'll see you soon.